Can you like introduce a bit about EB5AN?
Sure. Thank you, Annie, for having me here today. So I'm Sam Silverman, one of the founders of EB5AN. We're a national EB5 regional center operator and investment fund manager. So we started back in 2013, and today we own and operate 15 US CIS approved EB5 regional centers, and that allows us to do projects all around the United States. So since 2013, we've worked with almost 3,000 EB5 investors from more than 60 different countries, and we help investors identify high quality rural and urban EB5 projects and help facilitate the investment process.
I just want to confirm a bit like the last date, 956E of Twin Lake 4 got approved up to like how many times?
Yep, so Twin Lakes is a rural EB5 project that's already created several thousand jobs. We've done 4 different loan phases of the project. Each of the phases has the government's Form 956F approval. The fastest 956F approval we got was in about 2.5 months.
Oh.
The most recent approval, the 4th fund, I think was in about 6 months or so.
So we're gonna talk. Today's topic is mostly about investment alternatives options available for investors in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the question will be on that topic. So can you give like an overview of the investment landscape, like in terms of the options available in the U.S. market?
Yep. So in the U.S., most individual investors diversify their portfolio across public equities, bonds, and also private real estate investments. So public equities would be things like stock in Amazon, Microsoft. Bonds would be things like a long-term corporate bond for a large company, like Apple, let's say. And then private investments. So those would be investments in operating businesses, like if you had a friend who owned a restaurant, for example, and you put in money and you wanted to own part of that restaurant, or real estate investments, which we'll spend a lot of time discussing today. For real estate investments, there's kind of two different options usually. One is to just be a passive investor where you're just putting in capital and you're getting a share of a building or a share of a fund that's investing in different real estate assets, hotels, apartments, single-family homes. So you're just putting cash. You're not directly owning the real estate, but you have a share of the underlying asset, the underlying building, for example. The other method is usually requiring more capital, more investment, but it's where you're going to own that real estate asset directly. So the example would be if you bought a small condominium unit or if you bought a small home as an investment property and then you decided to rent it out and collect rent and use that as a source of income. So those are kind of the two primary options to get exposure to real estate in the US. Either be a passive investor, not a lot of work required, someone else is doing the work and you're just putting in cash and indirectly getting exposure, or you decide to take on a little bit more work, put in a little bit more money, but you're going to own the real estate directly as an owner. So those are kind of the very basic different investment options that most foreign investors are looking at when they come to the US, and it just depends on how much capital they have available, how involved they want to be, and also how liquid. So typically if you're investing as just a passive owner, it's going to be easier to buy and sell that ownership. But if you buy a house, then it's going to require more time, just like in Vietnam or in any other market, to sell the house, to find a buyer, to buy it, close, do all of that. So it just depends on what your goals are, how long you want to be invested, how liquid you want to be, and also access to financing. So there are advantages to having a green card, to being in the US, to eventually becoming a citizen. That'll give you more opportunities and more flexibility in terms of what investments you want to access and what returns you can achieve.
The information we just provided, it's very general about the investment landscapes. Now she wants to go a little bit deeper into real estate, and specifically, a lot of investors in Vietnam really want to find out about if there's any restriction when investing in real estate in the U.S. market. For example, like foreigners, if they come to Vietnam, there's a whole lot of restriction that they have to face with.
Yep.
They cannot own this type or that type of properties, or they can only own it for so many years. Or for example, in the Australia, foreign investors cannot buy a property that was already completed. They can only buy something that is under construction. So there's a lot of limitations. So
Yep.
investors are concerned and they want to find out if something like that is also exists in the U.S. market when investing in real estate.
Yep. Okay, got it. So those are great questions. So generally, the United States real estate market is a free economy, right? So that's one of the most attractive aspects of investing in the United States long term, is that there really aren't any restrictions with respect to foreign investors and what they can or cannot own in the United States. So if I'm from Vietnam or from China or from another country in Europe, I can buy pretty much any piece of land, any condominium, rent. There's a lot of laws in the United States that restrict how property sellers and landlords cannot discriminate. So if I own a building, I can't decide, I'm not going to rent it to foreign investors. I'm only going to rent it to citizens. That's not legal in the U.S. So there's no restrictions in terms of what you can or can't buy as a foreigner versus not a foreigner in the U.S. However, there are advantages to being a U.S. citizen or to being a green card holder and to being a resident, meaning you're living in a particular state or city that can give you additional financial incentives, right? So if I'm a foreign investor, yes, I can buy that house in Miami, just like a person who's a U.S. citizen could buy that same house in Miami, right? We can both buy it, no restriction. But the difference is that if I'm a green card holder or a citizen, or if I'm actually going to live in that house full time during the year, then I'm going to have access to additional benefits, right? So let's talk about financing first. Once you become a green card holder or a citizen later on, then you're able to access more favorable financing options. So when you buy a property, let's say back to the example of the home in Miami, let's say the property costs $1 million US. There aren't many lenders, many banks who are willing to loan money to a foreign investor who's not a green card holder, not a citizen. The ones that are willing to make a loan to help finance the purchase of that property are going to be only willing to loan a smaller portion, right? So for comparison, let's say you were a green card holder, you could probably get a loan of about 70%, maybe 80%, and your interest rate will maybe be 7%. But if you're a foreign investor, you're not a green card holder, you're not filing a tax return, you have no tie to the US, you're probably going to only be able to get a loan of maybe 40 or 50%, and the interest rate is probably going to be higher, right? So you could still buy the home, but you're going to have to put in more money, and you're going to have less options in terms of getting financing. Then in terms of being a resident, a lot of states, including Florida, have more favorable property tax ownership requirements and also capital gains treatment as well. So if you're a resident of Florida and you have the green card, then instead of paying, let's say $80,000 a year in government property tax, maybe you're only paying $30,000, right? So your annual cost to own that property is going to be lower. And then let's say you go to sell the property, you bought it for $1 million, Now you're going to sell it for $1.3 million. If you're a resident, which you can only effectively be a resident with the green card or citizenship, then the first several $100,000 of gain that you would be realizing when you sell it, you bought it for $1 million, now you're selling for $1.3 million. If you're a green card holder and a resident, the first several $100,000 is tax-free. So there's no tax on that gain when you sell the property. But if you're a foreign investor, you're not a resident, you're not a green card holder, you're just paying the top tax rate on all $300,000, let's say, of that gain, right? So more tax. Then the other point I want to make generally is that as a foreign investor, if you're not a green card holder or a citizen, you're also forced to pay taxes a little bit earlier than you would have otherwise. So what do I mean by that? As a foreign investor, the government knows that you're not paying taxes every year. So any gains that you have to be withheld and paid in advance to the government. Whereas if you're a green card holder or a citizen, you're paying tax every year, the government will wait until every April for you to pay those taxes. So it's a time value of money advantage. You get to pay the taxes, but you're paying them later, so you get to use the money for a little bit longer before you have to pay the tax.
So the question is, what's the average investment horizon for like an individual real estate investor? So like the holding period, basically, in the U.S.
Yeah, so for investments in fee simple underlying real estate where the investor is going to own the property directly, I'd say usually most people are targeting 4 to 6 year minimum hold period. There's a lot of transactional friction, right? So when you buy a property, you're going to pay a lawyer for closing, you're going to pay the title agent, you're going to pay a commission. And so, there's a lot of fees involved to buy the property, and then there are also fees involved when you go to sell it as well. So typically, you're not going to be buying and selling in a very short period of time. You typically buy it, improve it, rent it out, use it for years, whatever, and then 4 or 5, 6, 7 years later, the property's appreciated. Maybe you take out a new loan, or maybe you sell it, and then then you move on to something else.
Okay, so the question is that, so we went extensively over the benefits of owning and investing, owning in real estate as a green card holder or citizen. So now tell everybody like what's other benefits, just like general benefits as a EB-5 investor when you get the green card. What are the benefits basically beyond investment that you could kind of highlight that is sort of most favorable for somebody to consider being an EB-5 investor?
Sure. Yeah. So our clients are often focused on more flexibility for investing. They're focused on better educational opportunities for their families, and also better access to healthcare, for example, and just flexibility in terms of entering and exiting the United States. So as a green card holder, you're going to get access to the U.S. public education system, so you can go to school for free in the U.S. And in terms of college and university, graduate schools, you're applying for those schools as a U.S. resident when you have the green card. And so it's a lot easier to get into more of the competitive schools in the United States as a resident applicant than as a foreign investor applicant. And oftentimes the tuition fees and costs are also significantly lower. So you're going to pay a lot lower tuition, school fees are going to be a lot less for education. So those are kind of the main education-related benefits. In terms of healthcare, so as a citizen or as a green card holder, it's much easier to get healthcare insurance. You have more options. There's more companies offering those services to green card holders and citizens, so the prices tend to be lower, just like in the financing examples we talked about, and you tend to be able to have more options in terms of what coverage you're seeking. And then in terms of travel flexibility, with the green card, you can enter and exit the U.S. freely. There's no need for any visa applications. The renewal is every 10 years. And then after you've held the green card for 5 years, then you can apply to become naturalized and become a U.S. citizen if you want to pursue the passport, which will give you visa-free access to many countries around the world. So those are typically the major benefits that our clients are looking for, other than just kind of investment advantages in the U.S.
So the question is, so when they submit the application for adjustment of status, do they gain access to all the benefits that we just mentioned right now?
When you file the adjustment of status, if you're eligible to file that, you have to be in the U.S. already on a visa. So typically that's an F1 student visa, L1 corporate visa, or an E2 visa are the most common. So assuming that your situation qualifies and you have one of those valid visas, then once you make the EB-5 investment, you can immediately apply to adjust your status and apply for a flexible work and travel permit. We're seeing those get issued in about 60 to 90 days. They're each valid for about 5 years, so a long period. Once you have those, you can work freely in the U.S., start a business, travel in and out of the U.S. freely, no visa stamping required. But those are not going to give you benefits for making real estate investments, and they're not going to give you benefits for accessing healthcare or education. They will give you flexibility to enter and exit the U.S. without a visa, and you will be able to work freely or choose not to work and remain legally in the U.S., but they don't really give you financial benefits or some of those other benefits that we talked about. For those, you have to wait until the I-526E application gets approved, and then once that's approved, then you collect the temporary green card, and then once you have the temporary green card, then you get access to all of those benefits that we talked about earlier.
So the question that if they invest in like a property, would that qualify as EB-5? So no.
Yeah, so to qualify for EB-5, your investment has to create 10 new full-time American jobs, and just buying an existing property doesn't create any new job creation. So EB-5 projects are structured so that money is being used typically to fund a loan that's funding the development of new construction, and the construction activity, building homes, building a hotel, building an apartment building, that new economic activity, creating a new building by spending money on construction, labor, that creates the required 10 jobs that you need to qualify for the EB-5 green card.